For the next hour, you'll be leaving the Show Me state and entering the Show Me the Money state. So stop what you're doing, grab a pen, and get ready to learn. Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group will be your guide for straight talk and honest answers about living the life you deserve in retirement. So prepare to be empowered. Now, here are your Show Me the Money hosts, Jake Floyd and Jeff Shade.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Welcome to Show Me the Money with Randy and Jake Floyd, the radio show that gives you the straight talk and honest answers you need to help you reach your wealth management and retirement goals through smart investing and careful planning. My name's Jeff Shade, and as always, I am just here to ask the questions, but the words of wisdom and solid advice come from Randy and Jake Floyd at Floyd Financial Group. Of course, Randy has the week off, so we'll say good morning. Jake, how are you this fine Saturday morning?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for asking.
You're certainly welcome. Are you ready for summertime? I mean, Memorial Day weekend, last weekend, it is the unofficial start of summer. Things are going to get a little hot and sticky here in the Springfield area. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think that, the weather changing is good. It kind of gets everybody out and gets commerce flowing. You know, everything I think about, Jeff, comes from a money aspect of things, just because that's how
you're in the business.
That's what I do, and exactly, yep. You know, I always think about Memorial Day as kind of the start to tourist season. Memorial Day through Labor Day, again, if you've been in this area a long time, you know to steer clear of Branson if you don't like traffic. Because Memorial Day to Labor Day is the Branson season, if you will, and there's a lot of people that travel from around, and the highways get crowded and all that, but it feels like, spring is coming to an end, like you said.
Yeah, well, I think Lake of the Ozarks, that's sort of the Gold Coast of the Southeast, so to speak. But always glad to have our visitors here because, of course, they do come visit us and they bring money with them, which we like a whole lot. Anyway, I hope everybody else is having a great Saturday. We're looking forward to summer here, and we've got a few things to talk about on today's show, not the least of which, and we'll run down some of the things that we talk about each week, Jake, but that is inflation. You know, we keep waiting for inflation to come down. The Fed's goal was 2%, and I'll be darned, it's still 3%. It's a little over 3%. It is so stubborn, and I'm just wondering, when are they going to give up on the goal of inflation being 2%? Because I don't think that's realistic anymore. Do you think we can actually ever reach 2% again? And if so, what's it going to take?
I think we can absolutely get to 2%. The question is, can we do it without inducing recession? We knew it was going to be very difficult past 3%. I think it's going to continue to be very difficult. This Fed seems pretty bent on getting it down to 2%, yet they are very accommodative in ways that are working against themselves. At the beginning of the year, the Fed thought there would be maybe 3 rate cuts. I was kind of in that boat. Honestly, it really wouldn't shock me if they don't raise it all this year unless data starts to come down. Now, I do think that people ahead of the election will start to panic. We'll start to see less spending and things like that because people are going to start to tighten their belts a little bit, just kind of worried about what may or may not happen toward the end of summer. And if all that happens, that may be enough data for the Fed to consider a cut. But I really think, September is probably the first live meeting, meaning the earliest that they might cut, in my opinion. But it really could be 2025, depending on what happens here. There's a lot of people expecting turmoil, and therefore, when the turmoil actually comes, we may just yawn at it. It may already be priced in. It's hard to say, and again, a lot of people get paid a lot of money to pontificate about what the stock market, the entity that is the stock market, is thinking or breathing or whatever. Personally, I think that we're going to straddle the fence a little bit. We want to remain invested because this thing could just keep churning higher, but we do want to have a little bit of an eye toward being a little conservative here and there because I really think ahead of the election, we're going to get a few surprises that the market may or may not be ready for.
And in our next segment, I'm going to go into a little more depth, Jake, on the interest rates and why they are where they are and what's going to happen here in the future. Of course, nobody knows because nobody has a crystal ball. But I want to continue this conversation about summertime. Does the market really slow down in the summertime? In effect, is there sort of a market summertime blues type of situation?
So again, as we've said many times on this show, Jeff, the economy and the stock market are two different things. So the economy actually rips during the summer because everybody's out and they're spending money. The worst thing you can do for the economy is hoard money. If you make a lot of money and you go spend a lot of money, it's good for the economy. Some people are like, hey, that guy makes too much money. Hey, if he's spending it, it benefits everybody. But as you get into the summer, people really start to spend a lot of money. They start to really rack up the credit card and all that kind of thing, although they've been doing that for quite a while now. it does ramp up in the summer. And so usually toward the fall, we'll see the benefits of the summer spending. The question is what is the stock market going to do over the summer? And, we've all heard the adage, sell in May and go away, or a lot of us have. Basically, there's that adage says that, if you were to sell in May and buy in November, you would have a much, much better return than if you just held the market year round. And that is true. However, it's only true, I think, like 65% of the time. It's just when it is true, it tends to be very true. What I would say is, 2022, that would have paid off big. Last year, you'd have lost a whole bunch of money if you did that because the market was up quite a bit. As we get to summer, I wouldn't focus too much on the stock market's reaction. I would be more focused on what the indicators are saying and what potential panic there may be ahead of the election. As I've said before, I think that Gavin Newsom will likely show his face here in this election process, either through being the nominee or being Joe Biden's running mate or something like that. We will see. I got my prognostication last week, right?
Yeah.
So I predicted, that NVIDIA would do a split of 10-1, and boom, there it was, 10-1 split. I actually didn't expect to be quite that right that soon, but I knew it was a possibility. So we'll see if I get the Gavin Newsom one right or not. You guys can tell me I was wrong if I am.
I think that's a little bit scary. I don't know. I see what's going on in California. Of course, California is like its own country, but still, it's a difficult situation. I don't know that Mr. Newsom has done such a great job there, but hey, it is what it is. We'll see what comes down the pike as far as the presidential election cycle goes. You mentioned that NVIDIA, it was up, and I understand that NVIDIA was supposed to ride the stock market's rescue this past week, but after a record finish and blowout earnings, the stock market index is stalled. The Dow was over 40,000 a couple of weeks ago. Then it dropped 600 points, the biggest drop in over a year. What do you make of this shaky stock market that's up to record highs, and then it drops almost a record low in a year?
Well, the first thing I would say is 600 points isn't what it used to be, Jeff. Meaning at 40,000 Dow, it's a 1.5% move.
Yeah.
And while it's not, it's not great necessarily, it's also not that concerning. 600 points back when the Dow was 15,000 would have been a 4% daily move, which is a much, much bigger move. I would say that the Dow continues to look more and more like the NASDAQ. Every time they add a stock, it seems like to the Dow, it's another tech stock. It used to be that the Dow really didn't have any tech stocks in it, or very few. And now the who's who of tech are all in the Dow, and they're looking at maybe adding NVIDIA, or there's some speculation they may be looking at it. So after the split of NVIDIA, that qualifies them to potentially become a member of the Dow. So the Dow is a price-based weighted index. So the S&P 500 is a market cap weighted index, meaning how big the total value of the company is. It's weighted accordingly. In the Dow, it's simply the price of the stock that acts as the weighting. And so they don't ever want anybody to be $1,000 a share getting added to the Dow because it gives them an outsized effect on what happens there. And so them doing that split does pave the way for them potentially to get added. That would be a big deal if they did get added, which would fuel their rally even more. Although I would not hold my breath on that one, just because it is an incredibly volatile stock, and they don't usually add super volatile stocks to the Dow. I think there's a lot of wishful thinking and people wanting to start rumors to drive stock price, to be honest. We'll see what happens, and that may be in the cards. I don't know.
So the face of the Dow is beginning to look a little bit different with the addition of some tech stocks there, possibly. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Over the past 20 years, it occurs to me that social media has become very, very important. And actually, data has been a big commodity. Let's talk about AI and how this data plays into that conversation.
20 years ago, nobody was talking about your data. You have your data.
Right.
What is that? It seems like this nebulous type of thing, but your online data, what you do on Facebook leaves a footprint. Mm-hmm. And there's information out there that advertisers and others can use to market to you and other things. And so this data has become incredibly valuable, even though it's your data. And there's a big debate out there among the Edward Snowdens of the world and others as to, should you own your data? It is your data, meaning if somebody's going to profit off of that, should you be entitled to some of that profit, or should you have a say-so in who gets your data? That's still kind of up in the air, but data has become this incredibly valuable commodity, and arguably the most valuable commodity over the last 20 years or so. So what the next evolution of that is, with artificial intelligence and these AI language models, you have to train them on data in order, so you say, hey, I want you to think, and I want you to take this data in, and I want you to come up with solutions, and I want you to, what data it trains itself on is going to ultimately determine what that AI model is going to do. I think a good example of this is early on in ChatGPT. So maybe 18 months ago or so now, they asked it a question. They said, hey, write an article, 2,000 words on Joe Biden and why he's the greatest president in history. And so ChatGPT takes that and it writes this article. It's very eloquent and it makes Joe Biden sound like a great guy. And then it spits it out and it says, okay, here it is. And so then they asked it, they said, hey, write a 2,000 word article on why Donald Trump is the greatest president in history. And the AI came back and said, I'm sorry, we will not work in controversial topics, and you'll have to, do this on your own.
Yeah.
So the AI already has a massive inherent woke bias, to put it frankly. That's a very dangerous, slippery slope. Not that I'm saying this is going to happen, but what if the model says, okay, the environment is the most important thing, ESG, right? So if you tell this model the environment is more important than humans, and primarily, what is it that causes problems to the environment? It's humans. So what should we do about humans? We should exterminate them all, right? You can see how that logic could be dangerous in the future. Like right now, it seems harmless and innocuous, but long term, it could really become an issue. And what these AI models get fed is ultimately going to determine how they behave and what narratives they push. And if AI is ultimately going to control the technologies that control the narrative, we should be very careful about what these things are taking in. All that to say this is that the big content models that can be used to train AI are going to be the new currency. And so we already saw this a couple of weeks ago with Reddit. A lot of people on this show may or may not know what Reddit is, but if you go out and you Google, what's the best kind of oil to use in my 67 Mustang?
Right.
You'll go out there and inevitably there will be a Reddit thread where somebody had asked that question. There will be a whole slew of answers, conflicting answers, all kinds of answers about what might be the best thing to do. And so recently, ChatGPT, OpenAI, signed a deal with Reddit to allow that Reddit gets paid to allow ChatGPT to train on Reddit's content. And so I think we're going to see that companies like Reddit now, all of a sudden, where it was a free service struggling to bring money in, is going to get showered with money from a whole bunch of different angles of different AIs trying to use that content to train their AI on. And I think there's other vendors that will also be part of this, but I think that we're always looking for what's the next big thing, or what are some shifting ways of how money gets transferred around and how data gets transferred around, frankly, in today's world. And I really think that's one of them. I really think that the monetizing of this commodity of content and data is going to be a theme looking forward the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, I remember when you used to ask a question and it would have a Reddit answer. The Reddit answer was usually just a bunch of just wacky people who had some wacky answers, but not so much anymore. This artificial intelligence is beginning to scare me, Jake. I mean, what's going to happen when it begins to think and reason on its own? Or do you think artificial intelligence will ever have emotion?
That's hard to say, but I would say what's more scary, especially in the near future, is if it's training on some 40-year-old living in their mother's basement's thoughts about, society and life, I'd be more worried about what answers it might come up with, right? Especially in the short term, because, that's not gospel, right? It's just somebody in the basement typing away at 3 a.m. Again, long term, am I worried about, the sentient AI? Yes, I am. But I really think in the short term, we're going to have other problems with it that not a lot of people seem to be talking about right now. And I really think the bias in AI is going to be probably the biggest problem that we have with it over the next year, 2, 3 years.
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic, Jake, and we could talk about this for a long time, but we do have to take a very brief break here to remind our listeners that if you are listening to the program today and what we're talking about resonates with you, you're interested in getting in and sitting down with Jake and or Randy there at Floyd Financial Group talking about your individual situation and your journey towards a confident retirement. Of course, we are offering at no cost and no obligation an opportunity for you to do just that. It is the Floyd Financial Group Retirement Review. You can get it by calling 417-889-7233. Now, I know it's the weekend right now. It's summertime, but go ahead, make that call, 417-889-7233. Leave your name, your telephone number. Ashley will call you back during the week and set up an appointment for you to have that conversation with Jake or Randy there at Floyd Financial Group to answer all the questions that you need answers to get you on a solid path towards a confident retirement. Again, no cost, no obligation for this conversation. It's just a friendly no-tie zone there. 417-889-7233. You can also request your plan online at floydfinancialgroup.com. It's floydfinancialgroup.com. Jake, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll dive a little bit deeper into interest rates and the Fed and more when our show continues here on 104.1 FM KSTF, where Springfield comes to talk.
Ready for another helping of some more real money talk? Thought so. Now, here's another serving of Show Me the Money with your hosts, Jake Floyd and Jeff Shea.
Welcome back to Show Me the Money. I'm Jake Floyd, and in this segment, we're going to talk about interest rates. Are we going to remain higher for longer?
And Jake, that's an interesting question. You know, we've been waiting for these rate hikes for a while, and it seems to me that we're not going to have them. I mean, in a month, we'll be 6 months into the year. I don't see any indication whatsoever that we're going to have rate hikes. Why are these interest rates remaining higher for longer? And do you think that we're going to have any rate cuts, let alone rate hikes this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why they're remaining higher is because the market is not really doing the work for the Fed the way it would like it to, meaning with higher rates, we should be seeing the stock market have a little more trouble than it's having. And the problem is we're in a normal market, we would be having some growing pains having interest rates at 5.5%. We're having so much growth on AI, technology. These big tech companies are absolutely knocking it out of the park. We'll kind of get to that in a minute. But I think that ultimately what the Fed would like to see is a very slow slowdown in the market. What they don't want to see is they keep rates high and then all of a sudden things start to collapse and then they go straight into easing mode. They lower interest rates to zero, start printing money. They want to try to avoid that if they can. But as long as the market remains high and liquidity remains high and unemployment remains low, they really have very little reason to want to lower interest rates. And I think that over the next few months, we're probably going to see some of the signs that they need to lower interest rates start to happen. But the question is, when will it be appropriate for them to start to ease interest rate policy? And they've had a slew of different Fed members over the last couple of weeks coming out, and they're all kind of saying the same thing. They're saying, hey, we need to see several months of data in the right direction before we cut. We need to see several months. They keep saying multiple months of good data. And so right now we've got maybe like 1 month. Toward the beginning of the year, they were talking about having 3 rate cuts this year. And so I think what they're trying to do is correct that narrative to something that sounds more like we might cut this year, we might cut next year, but I definitely wouldn't be expecting 3 cuts this year. The only way we're going to get 3 cuts this year, I think at this point, is if things really start to fall apart, which could happen ahead of the election depending on what happens, but that remains to be seen.
Jake, I think a lot of people give too much power to Fed Chair Powell. I mean, what is his role in terms of rate hikes go? It seems to me that he's really just the mouthpiece.
Jeff, I would say that really depends on the Fed head. Whoever's the head of the Federal Reserve is simply the chairman. He gets 1 vote like everybody else. Depending on how much he's liked and respected amongst his colleague, he does get this internal power where if you have a Fed member who really likes the Federal Reserve chairman, he's more likely to vote with him. If you have a whole board who really likes the Fed chairman, this was the case during Bernanke. When Bernanke was in, what Bernanke said, Bernanke did, and that was pretty much it. And I think Jay Powell has a relatively good relationship with all these people. So I've said before, and I'll say it, I think the head of the Federal Reserve is the most powerful person on the planet. He can single-handedly topple governments all through the power of changing one interest rate. He changes every interest rate, not only in our country, but all over the world. He can crash economies. He can spur inflation. And I really think that's true of this Federal Reserve chairman. He doesn't have everybody's vote, but he probably has 6 to 8 of the votes that will vote with him no matter what, which gives him pretty much the majority. And there's certain things the Federal Reserve wants to have unanimous decisions on. I would say pretty much what Jay Powell says goes, even though he would push back on that if you asked him.
Jake, how does the election and the presidential candidates affect the Fed head? Does it have any correlation whatsoever?
You know, Jeff, until the election happens, it really doesn't have any effect. However, once the election is over, the president has the power to choose and potentially fire the current Fed head and choose the next one. So I think his job is definitely on the line, but I don't think he's going to be very worried about it until after the election. It's not going to be something people are paying too much attention to the Federal Reserve during the election process, unless it becomes a really big topic of conversation, which at this point, both sides have kind of not really wanted to talk about it, because Donald Trump does like the Federal Reserve, and he knows a lot of his base does not like the Federal Reserve. But Donald Trump likes the idea of having someone there to ease things and grease the interactions of business and things like that. The Fed is very good at that. But a lot of Trump's base does not really like the Fed. There's even this abolish the Fed movement that a lot of people would like to see. I'm not sure they understand what would happen to their 401k accounts if you abolish the Fed, but we can explore that another time. You know, you basically have in the Fed this entity that wants to make everything really easy. So when times are bad, they want to print money and say, okay, it's okay, make it better. Here's this medicine. And then on the other side, when things are too good, you know, they kind of lean back and say, well, we don't want to go too far too fast, so we're going to try to pull in the reins a little bit. And that seems like it would be a good thing, but it does distort financial markets. And free markets are kind of the base of our whole economy, and we don't really have free markets in the way that we did 40, 50 years ago. It's different now. And so, you know, I don't know that I would weigh in one way or another there. I think the Fed is good for the stock market, and then I'll just kind of leave it at that. But from a philosophical standpoint, I think it is a little bit anti-American to have the Federal Reserve single-handedly, unilaterally controlling the stock market, the economy, without any real presidential influence. It's supposed to be independent. I don't know how independent it really is, but it is more independent than a lot of other agencies for sure.
We're talking with Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. We're talking about the Fed, and we're talking about interest rate hikes. Again, our telephone number, if you want more information or you want to sit down with Jake here at Floyd Financial Group, talk about your concerns, 417-889-7233, 417-889-7233. Jake, because we expected these interest rate cuts, we've had non-possibility of rate hikes. What will be the consequence of us never having any rate cuts whatsoever, that this is the bottom right now?
Yeah, so if we don't have any rate cuts, I don't think there's any economist out there that would say that this is not a restrictive stance, meaning having the interest rate policy at 5.25 restricts the economy. And so it's a little bit like, you see these movies, these old-time movies, you have a really big football player and he's trying to move forward and some little guy jumps on his back and he's weighing him down, and then another guy jumps on his back and another guy jumps on his back, and eventually they bring him to the ground, right? It's a little bit like that, where the economy is moving and it's a big behemoth of an economy. And right now we have a few guys on his back trying to weigh him down. So eventually they will bring him down. The question is, what is the non-restrictive stance interest rate? If this is restrictive, meaning we're driving around with the brake on a little bit, is 3% not restrictive? You know, what's the neutral rate? That's what people have been asking. And I would say it's probably around 3%. So if we never had another cut, eventually the economy would suffer for that. But I really think that as soon as they can excuse cutting, they will. And we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but these interest rates have a huge effect on our debt service. And eventually we're going to need to refinance this debt at something lower than 5% in order to be able to make ends meet on a year-to-year basis in this country, to where our entire tax revenue isn't going just to debt service. So I do think that we will see cuts, but if we were never have another cut, yeah, it would eventually bring the economy down.
Jake, this is interesting news here about the interest rate cuts and Fed Chair Powell and so forth, but I want to circle back around to the average listener who's hearing this right now. As I said, this is interesting stuff, but the listener may be thinking to themselves, well, how does this apply to me and my journey towards retirement? How should the listener really digest this information, do you think?
One of the things I said last week, and I think this is very true, is that time in the market is more important than timing the market, meaning it's not something the average listener should probably be worrying too much about. I get paid to worry about it. That's why I'm worried about it. It's my job to manage assets, and so it's a huge part of what I do. What I would say is, if you are more than 5 years from retirement, you probably shouldn't be worried about it at all. You should just continue to fund your 401k. Make sure you've done your risk tolerance correctly. Make sure you understand you want to be as aggressive as you can be comfortable with. Don't disobey your risk tolerance, but otherwise, try to be aggressive and make some money and just let this thing do what it does. If you're getting closer to retirement, that's where it becomes more complicated. That's why I have a job, frankly, is because I help navigate retirement for people. And as we get closer to retirement, it's important to have a little bit more of an eye toward risk than maybe before that, because we don't want to be the victim of inconvenient timing of the market, meaning we don't want to retire necessarily right before COVID or right before 2022 or whatever, because the timing of retirement, once you start pulling money out of your assets, it really changes the game quite a bit. That's why we offer our free consultation, so you can come in and get your questions answered around that. Everybody's situation is so different, Jeff. I don't want to make too many generalizations here, but I would just say that when you come in for your free consultation, that's one of many things that we'll go over.
And to your point about the conversation that people are looking to have with you, Jake, here, again, no cost and no obligation for that. Our telephone number to get yours is 417-889-7233. And as Jake said, you may have some questions about how all of this, the market, the economy, how these interest rate cuts or interest rate hikes may apply to you. And I read a statistic the other day, Jake, that said almost 40% of people have no one to turn to for financial advice, at least credible financial advice. And we're here to change that right here in the last bastion of sanity, Springfield, Missouri. You do have a friend in the financial services industry and someone who is ready, willing, and able to talk to you. So if you'd like to sit down, have a confidential and comprehensive conversation about your retirement journey, get your questions answered. Again, no cost and no obligation here at Floyd Financial Group to make that happen. 417-889-7233 is the number to call. It's the weekend, I know, but go ahead and do it right now while you're thinking about it. All you've got to do is leave your name and your telephone number. It'll take less than 60 seconds to make that call. 417-889-7233. This one call really could make all the difference. You can find out more about us online as well at FloydFinancialGroup.com. It's FloydFinancialGroup.com. Jake, let's take a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about something that's rather interesting. 15 reasons why 65 is no longer the ideal retirement age. All that and more when our show continues here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
We're back with your financial catch of the day, and it's a big one. Here's more Show Me the Money Radio with your hosts, Jake Floyd and Jeff Shane.
Welcome back to Show Me the Money. I'm Jake Floyd, and in this segment, we're going to be talking about reasons why 65 is no longer the ideal retirement age.
And Jake, for many people, 65 seems like a magic number. It represents the year that many people decide to retire, yet it's just an age that works for some people. Now, I think that retirement is a relatively new concept, and by new, I mean in the last 50 to 75 years, because, when I think about my great-grandparents or even my grandparents, Jake, they worked well into their 70s, actually almost 80. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, so my grandparents on my dad's side, who are both now deceased, but they both worked until they ended up in the nursing home. It never occurred to them to stop working. And I think that there's some people probably listening to this radio show that are saying, I agree with that. And I think regardless of your view on retirement, which, by the way, I don't have any plan on working until I'm 80, for what that's worth. So I don't want people thinking I'm just sitting up here advocating that you need to work till you die. However, I will say this, the healthiest 85-year-olds I know are still working.
So let's talk about some of the reasons why 65 might not be the age that you hang it up. Number one is that you've reached your savings goal.
Yeah, so once you hit your savings goal for retirement, you got to factor in Social Security and healthcare costs and all that kind of thing, which we'll dive into some more here. But once you have enough money and you feel comfortable with your budget and inflation and all that, there's really no longer a reason to wait to retire. I have some people that fit that bill that are 52, 53 that are already retired. If you do a good job planning, or if your employer has just really great benefits, which in a lot of cases is how some of these people ended up where they are, it is possible to retire quite a bit before 65 if you want to. And once you hit that goal and you understand what your income is going to be, you may say, hey, why work another 10 years if I don't really need to work more time and it's not going to change my lifestyle? Why don't I just enjoy myself now?
Yeah, and I think conversely, too, some people may not retire at 65 because they need the money. I mean, the longer you work, that is a really good way to not run out of money, is just to continue to work.
Yeah, and sometimes I see where people, maybe haven't saved as much as they'd like, and they get to 65 and they're like, you know what, I'm going to retire from this high stress, high pay job. And then I'm going to go get a part-time job at Bass Pro or, wherever. And I'll get, 12 to 15 bucks an hour, but I'll be doing something that I like 20 hours a week. And so it's not so stressful. I think most people that want to quit work, it's either the workload on the body or it's the stress level.
Right.
And so once you fix whatever of those is bothering you, you may not mind going to work as long as it's out of those categories that you've been in for the last 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, well, as Randy says, you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I think there's something to be said for quality of life as well, too. So that's another reason why 65 may not be the ideal retirement age, is because maybe you have enough money or you don't have enough money. Next one is you need economic stability, and I think working beyond 65, 70, 75 is going to certainly add that.
Absolutely. And as long as you are working, once you have Social Security turned on and you're still working, if you're 67 or beyond or whatever, past your full retirement age, a lot of people end up with a raise at that point because they have their retirement and they have some extra cash flow. Some people are fine with that. It really just depends on what you want to do in retirement. Some of that depends on what age your kids are too. If your kids are 40 plus years old, a lot of times you don't have the little grandkids to spend time with if you're 67 and your kids are 45,
right?
Because they're already grown too. However, if you had kids a little bit later in life and you've got 2 and 3 and 4-year-old grandbabies, you might want to retire as soon as possible, spend as much time as you can with them. So everybody's situation is different. And I know I say that seems like every 5 minutes on the show, but it really is true. Everybody's circumstances are different, and there is no right or wrong answer when it comes to retirement.
And Jake, many people reach 65 and they think that Social Security is going to be enough to meet their economic needs for the rest of their life. I mean, that was true for, let's say, our grandparents, maybe some of our parents, but anymore, that is not true at all. How much of someone's annual income would you say does Social Security make up?
Probably around 40 to 50% would be my guess, Jeff, on average. Again, that varies widely. I would say that if the people that come to see me from this show are anything to go on, I would say are probably not of that mindset. Most of the people that come in, when we talk about Social Security, the questions are, is it going to be there? Can I count on it? How much should I count on? Should I take it now while it's still around? Those are usually the questions that I get. I don't really have so many questions like, well, I'm going to have Social Security and I'm set. I think most people are kind of beyond that now, and they realize that Social Security is potentially problematic and could have some changes in the future. And I think most people are focused on those changes and, where they're going to get the rest of their income from.
And at 65 as well, too, I think that certainly people have not reached their full retirement age. And another reason to not retire at 65 is that if you are still working and your full retirement age is 66, 67, 66 and a half, I mean, there's going to be a real cap on the amount of money that you can make.
Absolutely, yeah. The cap right now is like $22,530, I believe, or something like that.
Something like that.
Is the current year cap. So if you make more than that and you have taken Social Security early before your full retirement age, you'll have to pay back into Social Security $1 for every $2 that you make over that amount. And so if you're making like $60,000 a year and you turn on Social Security, you're going to be paying back some or all of your Social Security potentially. So that doesn't usually makes sense to do. And again, this is something that we'll discuss in depth when you come in to see me. But timing of Social Security taking is very different for each person. It depends on what you're wanting to do. Yeah, those are all factors to consider.
We're talking about reasons why 65 is no longer the ideal retirement age with Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. Another reason that you may not wait until 65, let's say you want to retire at 60, 62, something like that, is that the smaller Social Security check or just a smaller check in general from your investments is all you need. Do you find that many people need or want more money than they really need in retirement, or do they need more money than they really have?
The second one.
The second one, okay.
Yeah.
So they're a little short. It's very rare to find somebody who says, I don't need all this money. I'm going to take a smaller check. What you're saying is that another reason to not retire at 65 is because you just are not going to have enough money.
Yeah, I would say that most people, even if that's not true, feel like they don't have enough. It's very rare to have somebody come in and say, hey, I think I'm ready to go. I have plenty of money. Usually people come in and go, can I really afford to retire? And a lot of that is because these people understand how big a deal this is. It's a very big deal to pull the trigger on retirement and to say, okay, I'm going to turn off the income, from my job, which is something they've never done before, most likely. And so it's important to be prepared. But I would say, yes, there's people that try to squeeze more blood out of the turnip, so to speak, than they probably should be. It's also my job to help counsel them on when the appropriate time to retire is. And some people are willing to take a little bit of a pay cut because they're just that unhappy at their job, or maybe their health is preventing them from continuing to do the job that they do.
We're talking about reasons why 65 may not be the right age to retire with Jake of Floyd Financial Group. The other has to do with health insurance, Jake. Now, when you reach 65, you do get Medicare, right?
Right. At 65, you're eligible for Medicare. There's a few people, depending on your job, that you may actually not want to have Medicare just yet, if your current plan health insurance is better or cheaper or whatever. But for the most part, Medicare is a major upgrade in health insurance, either lower cost or much better benefits than what most people are used to. The healthcare cost is probably the number one reason why people do not retire earlier. There's a lot of people that I can think of that would retire at 59 and a half, 60, 61 years old if they could have a solution that was workable for health insurance. But because the health insurance system is so broken, no thank you, Mr. Obama, because it's so broken, healthcare cost is totally outrageous. And if they leave their current employer plan, their health insurance premium might double or triple or who knows what. And so they're forced to continue to work until they can get to Medicare to get the relief there. So I would say there's probably, I don't know, I would guess the number would be close to 50% of the people between 62 and 65 are only working for that reason.
Yeah, and if you are not quite 65 yet and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you want to retire and health insurance is an obstacle, think about this, is that if you do have a spouse that is still working, many times, Jake, you can get on their health insurance plan as well, too. So I think that might be an option for people. And again, let's talk about the non-financial side of retiring at 65 or not retiring at 65. My observation is that people who continue to work past 65, they don't really decline mentally or physically as much as they would if they just sat on the couch and called it a day.
Yeah, I think there's lots of people out there, Jeff, that can thrive in retirement without work being their sense of purpose. Maybe you're active in the church or the community, you're volunteering, those types of things. Those can give you a sense of purpose to fill in that sense of purpose that you've had for 40 years at work. But if you just retire to nothing and you go home and you just sit there and you watch Netflix all day, I can promise you that's not going to go well for you health-wise. It's just not. A body in motion tends to stay in motion. There's a lot of truth to that, meaning if you continue to keep moving and keep going, you'll continue to keep moving and going. If you allow yourself to sit down and not do anything, your health will decline. I've seen people that were very healthy at 65 and they just lost their sense of purpose and they make a major decline by the time they're 67 or 68 and you just hardly recognize them. So it's important to maintain some sense of purpose. Where you get that and how that comes to you is up to you, but you want to make sure you have a reason to get up in the morning.
Yeah, and a perfect example of this is your dad. I mean, I know he's not on the show today, but he is retirement age. But although he's not completely retired, he has set himself up for a very active retirement. What are some of the things that your dad does to keep active mentally and physically?
Yeah, so I'm sure if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, it's no secret that my dad does a lot of running and cycling and those types of things, which he got into with me probably close to 10 years ago now, when I was into those things very heavily, and I was doing ultra marathons and Ironmans and all that kind of thing. I kind of got him started on it, and now he's still pretty hooked on it. He's probably in the best shape of his life right now. Over Memorial Day weekend, he came over to our new place over there, and we were fishing for crawdads in the creek and throwing the frisbee and jumping the bikes and all that kind of thing, So whatever it is that gives you that sense of purpose, I don't think it necessarily has to be physical. You don't have to be doing 50,000 jumping jacks a day or, going to Zumba or anything like that. You just have to have a reason to not sit and waste away on the couch. That's really the part, I think, that you just have to have that why.
Right. Randy, I think, is an extreme example, as you said. I mean, he jumps mountain bikes. I know that he loves to do that. He also competed in a half marathon. I know that or a half Ironman actually, and I know that he's going to be doing that again. That is something that Randy likes to do, but I think being mentally stimulated, physically stimulated in terms of exercising and getting out amongst people is really going to contribute towards a long but happier life. Now, I mentioned before that I have an aunt now who's 106 years old. She worked on her 90th birthday. As a matter of fact, she retired on her 90th birthday.
Wow.
She was very fortunate to be able to do that. But now at 106, I mean, she still gets out with her friends. She plays cards and she goes out to eat. And she really is a great example for all of us. Now, I know that health considerations may restrict some people from doing that. But again, these are just examples of what could be. We're talking with Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. Reasons why 65 may not be the ideal retirement age. If you want to get in and sit down with Jake, talk about your individual journey towards a confident retirement, again, we're offering a no-cost, no obligation, and no judgment opportunity for you to ask your questions of Jake or Randy there at Floyd Financial Group. To get yours, call 417-889-7233. Go ahead, make that call this weekend. Somebody will pick up the phone on Monday, get your message. You have left your name and your telephone number. They'll give you a call back and set up that appointment for you. Again, no cost, no obligation whatsoever, and certainly no judgment. So take advantage of this opportunity to get your questions answered. 417-889-7233. You can also find out more about us online at FloydFinancialGroup.com. It's FloydFinancialGroup.com. Jake, time for a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation about why 65 may not be the retirement age that you'd always thought it would be. All that and more when our show continues after this on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
People of the Ozarks, step away from the fishing pole and prepare to be shown the money, because we're back with more straight talk and honest answers with Jake Floyd and Jeff Shea.
Welcome back to Show Me the Money. I'm Jake Floyd. In this last segment, we're going to continue talking about reasons why 65 is no longer the ideal retirement age.
And Jake, we left off with talking about health insurance. Certainly Medicare, you get it at 65, but you know, there are many other reasons why you may not want to retire at 65, why you may want to retire earlier, or you may want to retire later. Let's talk about travel. You plan to travel now and not later. And that conversation leads me to talk about your go-go years, your slow-go years, and your no-go years.
Yeah, Jeff, those go-go years when your health is good, you know, you get retired and all of a sudden you have the time to do all the things you wanted to do. And so right after retirement, those are the go-go years. As time goes forward, it's a little different for everybody based on health and that kind of thing. But you get to your slow-go years where you can still do some things, but you can't do as much as you wanted to or maybe what you used to. And then your no-go years are, you know, when you're kind of confined to the house or maybe even a facility of some sort. I think a lot of people think, well, I'll do that later. I'll do that later. I'll do that later. And even once they retire, you'll see them doing that where maybe they retire with maybe not as much money as they want or whatever it is. And they'll say, well, we'll wait a couple of years and then we'll take that trip. We'll wait a couple of years and we'll do this. And as, again, we've said a lot on the show, nobody is guaranteed tomorrow. I've seen a lot of people wanting to be conservative with things, and then they're just not here anymore, and they didn't get to do what it was that they wanted to do. So there's definitely a balance, right? We don't want to go out and spend every dime we have in the first year of retirement, but we also want to make sure that you get to do some of those things you've always wanted to do. If you like to travel, obviously, when you retire, when's the best next 10 years of your life going to be? You know, if you're over the age of 25, your next 10 years will be the best 10 years, right, of the rest of your life. So I have some people that come in and they say, you know what, I have $1 million and I want to spend 3/4 of that in the next 10 years. I want to just go crazy and I want to enjoy life while I still can, knowing that's going to put me in a position where I'm not going to have a lot of money later, but I won't be able to enjoy it later the way I can now, and I'm okay with that. So I have people that come in and say things like that. I have people that, you know, they retire and they just live on Social Security and they have a whole bunch of money and they're like, I'm worried I'm going to run out, so I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to touch it. Which, again, if you don't mind giving a big check to your beneficiaries, that's okay. If you have a charity you're leaving it to, or kids or whoever. But I would just say that sometimes the purpose that I serve here is people come in and they look for permission from me to do the things they want to do. And I'm happy to provide that, right? My goal is to make sure you have a 99+% chance of being successful in retirement. Nothing is 100%, right? But we want to make sure we're as sure as we can be that you're not going to run out of money. And so it's my job to keep an eye on things and say, hey, maybe we're spending a little more here than we should. Or, yeah, you can go ahead and take that trip you wanted to take, pay for your kids to go with you to Europe or whatever it is. Because, yeah, you have enough money and we'll do this one time and then that'll be that. Or depending on the situation, it could be all over the place, right? But I think sometimes people want to hear it from me, the investment expert, saying, hey, you're not going to run out of money. I'm not going to let you get to the point where you're risking running out of money. Yes, take that trip. And people are like, oh, I always want to take this trip, and that's great. Again, sometimes that's me being the counselor instead of the investment advisor necessarily, but that's okay with me.
It's as much psychological as it is financial, dealing with people going into retirement. So to your point about go-go years, slow-go years, and no-go years, how do you design an income plan? Would you suggest that people think about maybe drawing more income during the go-go years so they can pay for those things, and then maybe backing off a little bit and then backing off a little bit more? Or is it an even amount over the entire time of retirement?
I'd say most people elect to go with a more even amount because they're worried about what things may cost 20, 30 years from now. But again, I do have people that like to accelerate early on. I think it really depends on what you like to do. There's a lot of people listening to this show that really don't have any interest in going to Europe, right? They look around and they're like, this is America, land of the free, home of the brave, and I don't know why I would ever want to leave it.
Right.
And I'm kind of that mindset, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I do have people, though, that really want to travel. They want to go to the Holy Land. They want to go to Paris. They want to go to Australia. They want to go wherever. But that costs a lot more money to do than it does to drive down to Gulf Shores and go to the beach, right? And I think understanding what's important to you is like the very first step to understanding how much money you're going to need in retirement. If everything that you like to do with your spare time costs thousands of dollars, you're going to need a lot more money than the person who's happy to sit and drink black coffee on the back porch and watch the kids play in the yard, right? Mm-hmm. Not that either one of those is incorrect. It's just one definitely costs a lot more money than the other. And so understanding what you're going to do with all that newfound free time is just paramount to understanding how your income in retirement needs to look.
Why 65 may not be the ideal retirement age, that's what we're talking about with Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. And Jake, one of the turning points for a lot of people planning to enter retirement is paying off their mortgage. That is a big consideration as to when they should retire. Should paying off your mortgage stop you from retiring, do you think?
Not necessarily, Jeff, especially in today's world where a lot of people have ultra low interest rate mortgages, 2.5% or maybe even less. It's less necessary to pay off the mortgage. Back in the 80s when everybody's mortgage was 8 and 10%, it was very preclusive to retirement. But right now it's not necessarily the case. I would just say that really depends on your cash flow, how much guaranteed income you're going to need, and how much income you're actually going to need total. That's really going to determine that. Obviously, it's better to have it paid off than to not have it paid off. But that doesn't necessarily mean we need to be rushing to pay it off at the cost of not investing money, or taking money out of investments to pay off the house may or may not be the right decision, depending on how many years you have left on your mortgage, interest rate, payment, all those types of things. So there's actually a lot to discuss there. We probably don't have time for all that today, but that's actually a very necessary topic of conversation, and we talk about it a lot. If your house is not paid off, do not rush out and cash out your 401k to pay it off, please. That is 99% of the time the wrong thing to do. Not always, but the tax consequence to pay off such a low rate mortgage is probably not the right idea. So I've had people do that. And again, if you have done that, that's okay. But I would just seek counsel before you do anything rash with your retirement money or with your mortgage for that matter.
So that's an individual decision. I mean, you should pay off your mortgage if you just can't sleep at night knowing that you owe a mortgage. But otherwise, I think there are some very good reasons to have a mortgage going into retirement. Another reason why people may want to retire early is because they think their investments are solid, Jake. I mean, we think our investments are solid, but can we really count on something like that? How much of a predictor is there when you design your retirement investments that they're really going to pay off over a period of time?
Yeah, most people that I see are not investment experts. I would say that the vast majority of people I see, they funded their 401k, they forgot about it, and they woke up with money when they were 65. And that's kind of, it was accidental. They were purposeful in saving the money, but they really didn't give a lot of thought to how it was invested or anything like that. They were aggressive. They allowed it to be aggressive through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and today. And so it worked out good for them. However, Again, things change when you get to retirement, and you really need to have a little bit more eye towards security to make sure you don't have to go back out and earn all this money again if we have a 2008 type scenario at some point. So it's very important to analyze these things, especially as you get to where you're approaching retirement, to make sure we're not taking too much risk that might keep you from retiring or put you in a bad position once you do retire. As you get closer, again, 2 to 5 years out from retirement, you should probably be at least thinking about it. And then as you retire, you definitely need to look at it again.
And I think that many people focus on the financial side of when they should retire. That dictates whether they should retire at 65 early or later. But I think being in the right space emotionally and mentally are important as well. In retirement, you're not identified by your job anymore. You got to figure out who you really are. And I think a lot of people really don't know who they are outside of their job. What's your opinion on that?
I would say that's true, Jeff. I do see that quite a bit. If you were a welder for 40 years, you're a welder. And when you're no longer welding, what does that make you? I think there is a lot of truth to that. But I do think that the average person listening to this show understands that they are more than their job and has a good sense of purpose outside of that. But yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with our sense of purpose talk earlier, is just to make sure that, you have a reason for existing other than to work. I hope everybody has that, but if you don't feel like you have that, you should do some soul searching and explore that and think about what you're going to do when you do stop working and how you're going to spend your time and who you're going to give your time and energy to.
Jake, I think one of the big questions, along with do I have enough money to not run out of money in retirement, is can I truly retire at this time? I know that that's a question that you get once in a while. Are you many times the bearer of good news? Do people think they can't retire, but when you take a look at their financial situation, you find out not only can they retire now, but they could have retired several years ago?
Absolutely, Jeff. That does happen probably more often than you would think. I do have people come in and they just don't really understand what they can take off of this money safely and without risking running out of money. And once we understand that, people are like, wow, so that means I can retire? Probably one of the most common things I get is people come in and they say, well, I think I'm 2 or 3 years out from retirement. I just want to make sure that I can retire and when I should retire. And a lot of times I'll look at them and we'll go over everything and I'll say, well, if you don't want to go in tomorrow, you don't have to. And they're like, what? I've had people tear up and go, really? I don't have to, and I've had people that literally call that afternoon and quit their job if it's appropriate. Again, I'm not saying everybody needs to do that right now, so please don't take that as advice, but it does happen where people come in and there's really no reason why they should not go ahead and retire.
We've been talking about reasons why 65 is not the ideal retirement age with Jake Floyd of Floyd Financial Group. Jake, what is the average age, would you say, of people that you've dealt with that they turn it all in and say, I'm retired?
Jeff, lately here, it's probably more like 62. That's been shifting younger and younger over the years. I would have said it was probably over 65 10 years ago, but now it's probably early 60s, 61, 62, 63, somewhere in there.
Okay, so if you're wondering whether 65 is the right retirement age for you, get in and sit down with Jake and Randy at Floyd Financial Group and talk about it. Our telephone number, 417-889-7233, to get your no-cost, no-obligation, no-judgment retirement review. Again, it's 417-889-7233. Make that call this weekend. Ashley will call you back during the week and set up that appointment for you. It is just a friendly conversation with Jake or Randy at Floyd Financial Group, again, to get your questions answered, to find out when you could retire. 417-889-7233 or online at FloydFinancialGroup.com. Jake, we're out of time for this week. Thank you for your time, but I want to thank our fine people here in the last bastion of sanity, Springfield, Missouri, for joining us. For Jake Floyd, I'm Jeff Shade. Have yourself a great weekend. We'll talk to you again next week with another edition of Show Me the Money right here on 104.1 FM KSGF, where Springfield comes to talk.
The information provided in the preceding program is for educational purposes only and are not intended as investment advice for any individual or entity. All information contained herein believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representations as to its completeness or accuracy. The opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your financial professional before executing any financial strategy. Financial planning offered through Floyd Financial Group, LLC, an investment advisor registered in the state of Missouri.